Good day, gentlemen and gentlewomen. Today it's Saturday, the start of the weekend. Okay, to be fair, there are some debates whether or not the weekend starts on Saturday or on Friday evening, but you know, I am accounting for different time zones here, so good Saturday. What we're going to be doing today is some laid-back, chill weekend discussion on the first few days of this patch. We're going to take a look at all of these features that have been added into the game with this patch and look up how many of these additions have been quite good for many players, just exactly how many players will be taking advantage of this new added features, perhaps the ones that, you know, aren't really going to be that useful for the majority of the player base, etc, etc. Of course, everyone is going to have different feelings, different ideas on which changes they consider very good compared to some others that they might think are completely useless to them. So my first good change, which is ultimately what I was waiting this patch the most for, was the ability to freely swap covenants. In fact, it was my most awaited one, even more than many of the other changes and even more than the Legion time walking, which I think is going to be cool, but I'm not that eager. The one that I was waiting for the most was finally being able to freely move around covenants, especially when you want to look in the long term, especially for 9.2 for the patch that's going to come for the content that is actually going to be released. This change is going to be very major, very defining in how fresh you can keep your character by constantly being able to change covenants whenever you feel like. So I think that was a great change. I've already started the process on my shaman for going Kyrian, so that I can play both Mythic Plus and Raid Encounters on two different covenants. Eventually, I'm also thinking probably to move over to Kyrian, back to Kyrian on my Paladin, just to try out again Prot Paladin as a Kyrian, since my Paladin was Ventier. So this change was my most awaited one, my most liked one about this patch. But there have been others, and I have to defer to you for your point of view, because many of these things I'm not going to be impacted too much by, so I'm not too sure exactly how positive they are going to be. For example, one of the other big changes of this patch, you can say, was the removal of the AOE cap. So, you know, playing a healer, it's not that I have gotten too much into this change, even more so when I wasn't playing a healer and I was playing Elemental Shaman, for example. I wasn't even getting impacted too much by this change, since Earthquake already wasn't capped, for example. So, you know, it didn't really touch me too closely. So I wonder, how do you feel about these changes? And not just you players who have been benefiting from this change, but even the ones who have not really received any changes and now have to experience plenty of other classes and specs who now have this much more broad AOE cap. I'm talking about, for example, specs like Windwalker Monks, already doing great in AoE, having further abilities lifted from the AoE cap, perhaps talking about hunters, you know, BM hunters finally having back their beast cleave, not capped on 5 targets, but at the same time also talking about things like rogue. Outlaw Rogue not getting Blade Flurry lifted from the AoE target cap, for example. Of course, it is likely, I'm gonna take a guess here, probably the majority are going to see this positively, because it has been the majority of the specs getting these type of buffs, so it's likely that most of the comments are going to be positive. Although I can already guess some of the complaints, because if we look, for example, at the strongest and best performing AoE melee DPS specs, you will find Windwalker Monk, you will find Subtlety Rogue, you will find Havoc Demon Hunter, and even Arms Warrior in Mythic Plus. And those specs all have received buffs in the form of their abilities getting lifted from the AoE cap. So yeah, I think most people would be positive about this change. However, I've already seen some shades of complaints whenever we have to look at meta talks, specifically Mythic Plus, because that's when the AoE is going to matter most. So yeah, that's I would say mostly positive, with some creaks here and there of complaints. Another change, which I have basically never been impacted by negatively, but because Blizzard hotfixed it before this patch to be mostly irrelevant, most people forgot it used to be an issue for some, which is the Conduit energy. Conduit energy was made in a hotfix a few weeks ago to fully replenish every reset every day, so it was made much better, but now it's gone completely. As I said, I'm not too sure about this. I wanted your opinion because I don't really switch conduits and specs constantly, so that my conduit energy was constantly being starved. It's also good that different specs in my class use different soulbinds, both for shaman and even for paladin, so I was mostly fine with my conduit energy, but plenty of people evidently had quite a few issues with this wretched system. I'm going to say that even without people like me who haven't really found any issues with this system, this will still be seen as a universal win to have this arbitrary restriction lifted from your freedom of playing your class and your spec, so very good. I wonder if any are feeling too bummed out about the last minute change about the campaign skip. As you know, Blizzard initially kind of wanted to make you completely skip your campaign story if you already completed it on a different character whenever you were switching Covenant, but then last minute they decided that no, you know what, we are keeping the whole story, we will just make you be able to ignore it. So you can get your 3 soulbinds without having to do the story, you can get to max renown without having to be capped by the progression of your story. I wonder if some people are feeling negatively about it. Again, I'm not too sure because it's not that now you are forced, you shouldn't. At the very least, you shouldn't feel forced to be doing the story. You're not gonna get this bug in your head reminding you constantly that you should really finish the story to finish up your character, the power that you're missing on your character, because now that it's completely gone, now that all of this power is available to you without having to do the story, I think it's mostly an okay change. At the end of the day, when you put this on a scale, it is still a shorter time that you have to spend with chores and mundane content, so I think overall should still be positive. One thing for alts, more importantly, I am pretty positive about, I think most people will be positive, is the weekly quest, the Redeemed Souls quest. You know, the cursed quest put in there just to remind you that the Maw exists, the one that sent you to the Maw to gather 20 redeemed souls every week. It was confusing, it was annoying. Why couldn't this just be extended into Korthia? Why couldn't you just pop some souls here and there around Korthia so that you could do it while you were doing your dailies, for example? Whatever. At the very least, now in 9.1.5 this can be done in Torghast, so effectively this quest doesn't really exist anymore because you just do it passively whenever you are in Torghast, so that's pretty good. What is also pretty good, particularly, and this is not just for alts but also for your quicker Covenant building process, is the fact that now they made this quest repeatable. After you complete it the first time, you can still go back after doing Torghast. You can go back and pick another quest and go again and constantly get 20 redeemed souls. So you should never have any issues with being gated, locked with timers, essentially. Artificial timers in how many buildings you can build. Now the only timer is basically waiting for the building to finish constructing. So after that you shouldn't have issues with redeemed souls. I think this is a good change that most people would find positive. However, you always have to remind yourself, I know, I'm not forgetting this, that many of these positive changes were still things that would have, should have, and could have been available since the release of the game. So let's not forget this, okay? This is implied for many of these positive changes. Being able to recycle legendaries, being able to re-farm Torghast, re-clear Torghast for consecutive rewards, being able to re-farm redeemed souls, being able to switch covenants for free. All of these things should have been in the game since the start, okay? Let's be clear. So they are positive changes, sure, but they are coming very late, just in case we don't have any misunderstandings. Now, after this, since we are on Saturday, people will have gone through their Wednesdays and Thursdays of raiding, so they will have experienced the new nerfs, the new bosses being nerfed in Mythic, particularly the lack of balls. The lack of balls of the first phase of Painsmith, as well as nerfs to Ner'zhul and Soul Render, plus the nerf to Sylvanas. In Mythic it was minor, but in Heroic Sylvanas has been heavily nerfed, so I wonder how many of you have already tried these bosses, if they have felt easier. I am particularly interested, of course, in Painsmith, just to know if the initial fear, especially of guilds progressing on Painsmith, the fear that removing the balls of the first intermission was actually going to make the fight in the end be a little bit harder. I wonder if many people have been able to settle this question. What we have not experienced, though, what we can't really cast our vote yet, at the very least fully, is in the Mythic Plus changes. Because the three major changes of Mythic Plus were the Necrotic nerf, the Bolstering nerf, and the Raging nerf. And what do you know? At the very least, straight from the start, you get to test Raging, because Raging is this week. This week we have Fortified Raging and Explosive, so you get to test the nerfed Raging, now only increasing the damage of the mob by 50%, but you know, you could still soothe the mob, you could still dispel the enrage, so you know, it wasn't really the main change people were looking for these nerfs of Mythic Plus. The ones that were the big important ones were the nerf to Bolstering and the nerf to particularly Necrotic. Well, you know, there is a problem with this. The problem is that it's going to take a month before we get to see Necrotic, and 5 weeks before we get to see Bolstering. So yeah, cool changes to Mythic Plus, however, we can't really test them yet. So I guess we're going to be putting this judgment on hold for the moment. I also would like a report for all of the players that were interested in the changes to Island Expeditions. You know, how quick, how easy is it to solo a Mythic Island Expeditions for rewards? Because now with 9.1.5 you can solo Island Expeditions, and you know, for collectors it's a pretty rich. There are multiple mounts, there are dozens of pets and toys, and there are actually hundreds of transmog pieces you can get from the expeditions. So as I said the last time, congratulations for being able to escape your mental asylum where they kept you in, you and all of your fellow Island Expedition enjoyers. So for the next few days that you have at large, before the law enforcement units inevitably catch up to you and send you back to whatever institution you were locked in, you can share whether or not this change, this solo Island Expedition change, has been good or not. One of the other major changes I pretty much have no way of gauging whether or not it's good is the quality of life rep farm mechanisms added to Korthia. As I am already tier 6 and I really don't want to go back to Korthia and do my daily grind anytime soon, I have to defer this judgment to players who still are doing this farm, this grind. There have been quite a few changes, quite a few additions to get way more relics than you usually do, so the increase should be significant. I know from my older days that you could get some 1,000 to 1,400-ish per day. I wonder now with these changes what numbers we are sitting at every day when it comes to the grind of the reputation. And then lastly, we have the scattered minor changes. I know the Threads of Fate changes, particularly to Torghast, are pretty bad. The 9.1.5 added a series of quests for experience that included PvP battlegrounds, included bonus objectives and zone objectives with better rewards, also gave you renown from bonus objectives as well as anima. But the particular one, the focused one, was the fact that you could also get one for Torghast. You could go in the Tower of the Damned for a daily quest for experience and soul ash. Now, there is a problem, of course. Number one, that was just a daily for Torghast. It wasn't repeatable. And then the experience that you get in Torghast is terrible. It's something we touched on before. So now we have the confirmation that the possible, speculated, perhaps viable leveling in Torghast is not really viable at all. So, you know, perhaps a lost opportunity to get people, the ones that enjoy Torghast anyways, to be able to level in the zone, in the activity, the minigame. Instead, it's not really a thing in 9.1.5. Then you have the other couple of changes, the repeatable Soul Ash and Soul Cinders grind you can have in Torghast now. Again, it should be universally pretty well received because now it means your alts are no longer being locked, or perhaps because you have the ability to roll to different covenants now whenever you want to. It's very likely some of these specs are going to require a best in slot legendary, which is the covenant specific legendary. So what happens if you are a Night Fae who moves over to Kyrian and needs the Kyrian legendary? If you are one of the players who had no Soul Cinders left, you basically had to wait some 4 weeks, 3.5 weeks. Whereas now, all you have to do is run some 7, I think, back-to-back Torghast runs in a row until you get enough Soul Cinders to craft your 262 max level legendary. So it is good for both alts and mains, this change at the very least. The one about the Runecarver, the one about the recycling, you know, it's a good change because it gives you an extra thing you can benefit from. I don't think it's going to be too beneficial for many people. It's cool because now if you want you can, but I don't think it's going to happen. You will very likely dump all of those leftover 210, 235 legendaries that you might have used months and months and months ago, but all you will be getting back is just Soul Ash, which you should still have plenty of. If you have Soul Cinders, you are guaranteed to also have lots of Soul Ash anyways, so I don't think it's gonna be that needed, but still, you know, it's something extra. It's always nice to have something more than having something less in this case. So I can't complain about this change. So with this last little bit of changes, we have gone through most of them. Most of the major changes that might in some way impact the enjoyment levels of this current content patch of 9.1, this current tier. There are quite a few ones that very likely are going to be positive for the majority of the player base, and then some of which will be a little bit more niche, not really for too many of the player base, but it's good. It's good that they exist because at the very least, even for the people who still needed that little bit of extra help for these type of features, at the very least now it's in the game, which is better than not being in the game. So still positive in the end. Of course, what is not positive, as we point out again, just in case we all forget, what is not positive is that many of these changes should have existed since the release of the expansion. They should not have been brought out mid-expansion out of nowhere. And then also the fact that part of this patch is not really out yet. It's out in a month. The Time Walking Legion Mythic Plus as well as the Mage Tower Challenge event. So overall for me it's still positive. It's still good, but you do have some shades, you know, you do have some bittersweet shades of Blizzard that kind of taint a few of these new additions. Now that we have gone over what I wanted to go over, let me guys know what you have been doing, what you have enjoyed and not enjoyed in this first few 3 to 4 days of this patch. Did you think something was going to be one way and turns out you have experienced it in the completely opposite way? Have you found out something that you didn't think was going to be like that in this patch? Let me guys know. Let everyone else really know. For now, however, we can stop here. As usual, it's no different on the weekends. If you want to support the channel and continue supporting me, my dog, my cats, my family, and even my butler and my maid, you can leave a like on the video, comment down below about your fresh 9.1.5 experiences, as well as subscribing to this channel, but only if you have green eyes. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, if you have one pair of socks and you're cold, and you put a second pair of socks and you're still cold, what the fuck do you do?